The Six-Day War, you said, was an Israeli provocation.
Yes.
To call it an Israeli provocation would be the same as, well, you know that they closed the Straits of Tiran, the Gulf of Aqaba.
Straits of Tiran is what you're looking for.
Yes, the Gulf of Aqaba to shipping, the Red Sea. The Egyptians closed the Suez Canal to Israeli shipping. 7 or 8 armies were amassing, led by Nasser. The Jordanian army was given over to Egyptian control. They were indicating to the masses who were dancing in the streets in jubilation when Nasser made statements that they were going to kill every Jew, drive them into the sea.
The problem is that that particular history is not true. The closing of the port. Okay, fair enough. I was going to sort of get to the answer.
So to say that Israel provoked that war would be similar to saying that the West provoked the Second World War, because Hitler did not declare war on the West. He marched into Poland, and the West declared war on Germany. So we could say, using the same reasoning, that the West provoked Hitler into a world war.
I'm sorry, that analogy doesn't work. And the reason I can say that is I have the words of the Israeli generals who fought that war. Menachem Begin, in 1982, said in the New York Times, the Egyptian army's concentrations in the Sinai did not prove that Nasser was really ready to attack us. We must be honest with ourselves. We decided to attack him. Moreover, Moshe Dayan stated also that Israel made repeated border provocations against Syria in the north. And at the time, Syria and Egypt had a mutual defense pact, that if one were attacked, the other were attacked. The other would come to his defense. Let me go to, Levi Eshkol, Prime Minister, denied that Nasser had any offensive intent. On October 18, 1967, he told the Israeli newspaper Yediot Aharonot, the Egyptian layout in the Sinai and the general military buildup there testified to a military defensive operation. Moreover, 100,000 of Nasser's best troops were bogged down in a war in Yemen. He had neither the manpower nor the artillery.
Which he then transported into the Sinai.
No, he did not. No, I'm sorry, sir.
To say that Israel is running the United States is beyond idiocy.
Well, I'm afraid, sir, unlike you, I have some evidence to back up what I say.
What I find you to be, Greg Felton, is an anti-Semite, a Jew baiter, a Jew hater. Many of your comments I find extremely offensive, and I find also your theory that there is a Jewish plot against America to be absolutely ridiculous. You have no validity. You have no validity whatsoever.
Now, I would like to read, if I may, some statements by some people from 1919. It'll just take 1 second. On March 4th, 1919, Congressman Julius Kahn presented Woodrow Wilson with a letter from 3 prominent Jewish Americans. They were Henry Berkowitz of Philadelphia, Max Senior of Cincinnati, and Professor Morris Jastrow of the University of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It read in part, "We raise our voices in warning and protest against the demand of the Zionists for the reorganization of the Jews as a national unit, to whom now or in the future territorial sovereignty in Palestine shall be committed. And this demand not only misrepresents the trend of the history of the Jews, who ceased to be a nation 2,000 years ago, but involves the limitation and possible annulment of the larger claims of Jews for full citizenship and human rights in all lands in which those rights are not yet secure. We ask that Palestine be constituted as a free and independent state, to be governed under a democratic form of government recognizing no distinctions of creed, race, or ethnic descent, and with adequate power to protect the country against oppression of any kind. We do not wish to see Palestine either now or at any time in the future organized as a Jewish state." And that is the voice of American Jewry in 1919. Flash forward now to March 1933.
Objection. Take it too long. He's not answering the question.
Yeah, but I want to...
You're in charge, Mr. Whitney, not him.
One second. This comes 2 months after Adolf Hitler seized power in Nazi Germany. The speaker here is Rabbi Joachim Prinz. Our acknowledgement of Jewish nationality provides for a clear and sincere relationship to the German people and its national and racial realities. Precisely because we do not wish to falsify these fundamentals, because we too are against mixed marriage and are for maintaining the purity of the Jewish group. The realization of Zionism could only be hurt by resentment of Jews abroad against the German development. Boycott propaganda, such as currently being carried on in Germany, in many ways is in essence un-Zionist, because Zionism wants not to do battle, but to convince and to build. Our observations presented herewith, and this is from the Zionist Association for Germany, rest on the conviction that in solving the Jewish problem, according to its own lights, the German government, that's Hitler's government, will have the full understanding for a candid and clear Jewish posture that harmonizes with the interests of the state. It is my position that there is a fundamental distinction between a Jew and a Zionist. They are not equivalent. And it is important to state that I have never spoken ill of the people who died under Hitler. I have never spoken ill of Jews. And I should think that people who wish to honor the people who died in Hitler, Germany, should make that distinction. Because it is possible to speak honestly without being anti-Jewish.
The U.S. government has a multitude of lobbyists from every sector in its nation and from every country, including from Arab and pro-Palestinian interests, as well as pro-Israel groups. Because someone disagrees with an American policy on Israel does not mean that the Jewish lobby is any more powerful than the softwood lumber lobby or the Mexican immigrants lobby. Abraham Foxman has written an excellent book called The Deadliest Lies, where he says that as history shows us, when people in the West are sufficiently anxious, fearful, angry, and confused, a familiar scapegoat tends to rise to the surface again and again. It is either the Jews or now the State of Israel. To say that the Jewish people do not have a right to the State of Israel, where their ancestors and their relatives have lived for thousands of years, is to say everyone in this room who is not Musqueam or Coast Salish has no right to live in Vancouver.
About the foundation of Israel, Israel was actually created quite illegally in 1948. The partition plan was never ratified by the Security Council. When Ben-Gurion declared statehood, he did it without moral, legal, or political foundation. And in fact is that the partition plan had 3 more months to run before statehood was declared, and besides which the UN has no authority to take land from one person and give it to another. The partition plan was on its face illegal, never ratified, and as such does not exist in international law. Israel was not created legally. And that is something that can be documentedly searched now by anybody who cares to read and open his mind.
This microphone.
Next.
I think it's really very sad, and I wish everyone would just pause for a moment. If I said something critical of India, no one would accuse me of being anti-Hindu. If I said something critical of France, no one would say I was anti-Catholic. And I criticize my own country and my own religion, which is a very small minority, Zoroastrianism. My religion, I know what it's like to be persecuted because we literally were wiped out as a religion. But this is what really disturbs me. It's why is it I find, and I have so many good Jewish friends, and I've always had so much respect for so many Jewish activists. What really I find very tragic is that there are many people who equate Judaism with Zionism, and if you say anything critical of Israel, you can't even say one thing critical of Israel without them literally getting on defensive. Do these people not ever criticize their own country? Do you never ever criticize your own country? What concerns me is what you talk about Christian Zionism. And these people, if anyone is anti-Jewish, these are the people who think the Jews are going to hell.
You're quite right.
This is, why is it Jews? I can't, I'm amazed at how many will embrace them. And I'll just give you an example. And then
May I address that quickly? We're running out of time. I would like to address that very good point. Right now, the only people who really have time for Israel are the Christian Zionists, even though they have a very anti-Jewish, and what some people erroneously say is anti-Semitic point of view. The reason is you're quite right. The Christian Zionists want all the Jews to gather in Palestine so Jesus can make a second appearance, rapture all the good Christians up to heaven, let the Jews suffer on the planet Earth. The reason is that Jews overwhelmingly now are turning away from Israel. And even the American Jewish Committee is finding that Jews in North America, American Jews, are finding far less affinity for Israel. Honorable Jews like Mearsheimer, Walt, Finkelstein, Tony Ute, Joel Koval, and other people are finding it necessary to remind people that something is seriously wrong in Israel. And Israel is actually eating itself from within.
Okay. One final comment.
My question is this. Could you possibly elaborate on the massacre of American troops aboard the USS Liberty?
Yes, sir. The USS Liberty was deliberately attacked by Israel in 1967. And it was done so deliberately because the Liberty was a U.S. listening ship, and Israel was planning to execute Egyptian prisoners of war. It could not afford to have the United States Liberty listen in on the communications. They did not want to be caught committing a war crime, because a war criminal wants to do its dirty work in private, in the dark. For more than 90 minutes, the USS Liberty was subjected to a strafing attack. Dozens upon dozens of soldiers, seamen, American sailors were murdered, deliberately murdered. And Lyndon Johnson covered this up because he would not acknowledge that Israel committed a mass murder, and the documentation of this is irrefutable and is extant, and anyone who wants to investigate it may do so. The Liberty was a crime against the United States, and if anyone else had done it, the United States would have gone to war. But Israel gets away with murder literally, because Israel is Israel. And the connection between Zionist money, influence, coercion, and power and media in the United States ensures there will never be proper, honest debate about Israel until forums like this circumvent the national media and expose people to opinions that they might not otherwise have come to hear, and ask them to examine their own prejudices and open their minds and face reality squarely in the face.
I disagree with some of the things you have said and some of the things the opponents have said, but I will defend to the death your right to say them and the right of this library to provide the forum.
Thank you very much.
And possibly even more so the courage of the Vancouver Public Library, its staff and its board in letting this event go ahead. As I said, I may not agree with what you say, but it's important that these venues be permitted to be provided authors such as you.
So you agree that Islam should be the subject next year?
I look forward to hearing a speaker on Islam. And secondly, I know you'll be talking mostly about the U.S., but could you make some comments on the Canadian government, since it appears to the lay observer that Harper and his foreign policy has made a significant change with respect to the Middle East and to Israel than previous governments. So could you talk to that for a moment, please?
Certainly. Actually, the basic subjugation of Canada to Israeli mouthpiece happened with Paul Martin, and it happened because Erwin Kotler essentially interfered with foreign policy and made Canada become an apologist for Israel at the United Nations. I will tell you one thing about Harper. Before the Palestinians elected their government in Gaza, Harper held a conference call with 3 members of the lobby, and he promised them that he would not recognize Hamas if it were elected. So we have a government, our Prime Minister, openly colluding with agents of a foreign government and predicating Canada's national foreign policy on the interests of a foreign government. I have just been reading recently that the United Canada, Harper, has signed a document that will allow the U.S. to send its troops up here without advance notice for security reasons. Harper is one of the most venal, self-interested traitors this country has ever had the misfortune to be misled by. Harper serves Israel and the United States, which I generally call Israel-America, because to all intents and purposes, there's no distinction. And it's a tragedy to see what has happened under this government. Massive, a Canadian peacekeeper was killed deliberately by Israel, even after being warned off hours before the event. And all this man could do was ask his wife what the hell he was doing there in the first place. So I'll tell you what he was doing. He was doing his job. And he was murdered because Israel doesn't want witnesses. And we will not come to the defense of our own people if it would embarrass the Zionist entity in Palestine.
The Arabs say, drive them all into the sea. And the Israelis say that the Palestinians are lice and cancers to be cut out. We have to ignore the fundamentalists and ignore the extremists on both sides and try to form alliances. with moderate, informed people to go forward and compromise. Well, I'm sure many people are aware of Theodore Herzl, but also under Carter, there were 20,000 illegals in the settlements, settlers in the settlements, and he was promised no more. They are now about 400,000. Your right has just been ignored. Let's see, I'm trying to read my writing, which I wrote so quickly.
While you do that, I can make one comment that during the so-called Truce of Oslo, when Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin and Bill Clinton formed that great signing ceremony in '93, during the period until 2000, Israel increased the number of illegal colonies by 100% and doubled the amount of people living in those colonies by 100%. Israel has never abided by any international law and never will.
Well, that's the same recent agreement in Maryland. They did that. Now, as to getting the other point of view, the best place to get the other point of view is in Israel itself, in Haaretz.
You're quite right.
Far more actual debate about what's going on, what they agree with Israel, what they disagree with Israel, in Haaretz than we're ever allowed to hear here.
Thank you very much. A very good point. I want to commend you for that because Haaretz will say things openly that we are not allowed to say here. Like today, Israeli soldiers talked about choking Palestinian boys for sport to see how long they could stay alive and then reviving them. Or just pulling their clothes off and just humiliating them.
It's very... Could you wrap up, please? Sorry. And one of my biggest shocks when I was in Israel is to see that they mandated, and I can't remember which is which, but if you're Israeli or Jewish, then you have a yellow license plate or a blue one, I can't remember which. If you're Arab, you have the other color.
That's correct.
I can't understand how somebody suffered through the Holocaust with a star or something that's yellow, doing this to another group of people. And that's just a mentality.
May I address that quickly?
Yeah, I think we'll have to move on.
Yeah, I just want to say that is truly appalling. And yes, I mean the Palestinians are being treated like the Untermenschen that the Jews were. But it's interesting to state that the people who wore the star and the people who were persecuted were not the Zionists, because they were the ones who were helping the Nazis. And the fact is that Israel was only created out of pressure and blackmail by the United States and other countries. It did not have a right to exist. It has never had a right to exist. It is the last vestige of Western colonialism in the Arab world, and it is killing everybody.
Okay, I think we should move on over there.
Yes, Mr. Felt, can you describe, is it not true that the Jewish people under Yitzhak Shamir during the 30s were trained in Mussolini's Italy? And Yitzhak Shamir, when he tried to march with the Germans, these records are all in the Jewish Holocaust Museum at the, how would you call that? The Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem.
Yes, one of the great things that no one ever talks about is how Yitzhak Shamir wanted to form an alliance with Hitler. And he went to Berchtesgaden to try to persuade Hitler to join with the Jewish army against the British. And Hitler thought about it but said, nah, wasn't interested. Because the sad thing is that the last great unprosecuted war criminals from World War II are the likes of Israel Shamir, David Ben-Gurion, and the likes of Yosef Weitz, people who actually, as I stated here, like Rabbi Joachim Prinz, actively supported the Nazi Reich because they wanted to persecute the Jews so badly they would want to leave, but only to Palestine. And David Ben-Gurion actually said in 1935, and I will paraphrase, if I thought I could save all the Jewish children of Germany by allowing them to emigrate, or risk having half of them die by forcing them to go to Palestine, I would regrettably choose the latter. The Zionists actively took part in the extermination of European Jewry. And that is something, whether you like to believe it or not, is actually written, discussed, and if you want to see who did it, a Zionist writer named Edwin Black wrote a book called The Transfer Agreement, and it outlines in painstaking, sad, disgusting detail the collusion of the Zionists with the Nazi Reich to sabotage the Jewish war veterans of America who started the worldwide boycott to bring down Hitler's Germany. That boycott was so effective, Hitler's Germany, according to the British government, might not have survived about 3 or 4 years because it needed so many imports because its economy had been so skewed by the need to pay reparations to Britain and France for the First World War. And it's sad to see that people who teach history have no knowledge of this. Edwin Black.
Just a comment to Mr. Felton and then a question for the Chief Librarian. I'm distressed by this painting of Zionists as this bloc that believe in one thing only. I think you can be a Zionist, you can support Israel and its right to self-determination. You can also support the Palestinian people's right to a state.
No.
Well, why don't you just let me finish? It's my opinion. That's your opinion.
Right.
You know, you're welcome to it. There are many people, there are many Israelis who support the peace process, who support two nations. There are many North American Jews that have a wide diversity of opinion and yet would call themselves Zionists. I think it is really wrong to paint this bloc as being this scary Zionist bloc. When Zionists come in many colors, flavors, and stripes, there are as many types of Zionists as there are Jews. There's a great diversity in the Jewish community. There's a great diversity of opinion within Israel. And I think a little more sophistication would probably land, a little more credibility to your arguments. Anyway, that was simply a comment, and I don't really need to any more.
Well, no,
What I would like to
hang on,
say-
wait. I want to respond to that 1 second. First of all, I appreciate that you're quite right. There are leftist Zionists, there are rightist Zionists, and there are cultural Zionists. However, with respect to the state of Israel, in 1949, Israel was admitted to the United Nations, and it was admitted under UN General Assembly Resolution 273. Israel is the only UN member to be signed in on a conditional basis. It signed a document by which it promised to recompense every Arab displaced by the invasions of 47-48 and to return to their homes. And they implicitly accepted the terms of UNGA Resolution 194. And since a GA resolution is enforceable, if both parties agree to be bound by it, Israel has every right, as obliged by law, to let every Palestinian go back home. Israel has been in violation of that ever since and is therefore a member not in good standing of the UN. Essentially put, if Israel wants to exist, it has to let the refugees come home and live in their homes and stop importing Jews from all over the world to take their place.
Until that's the United Nations.
And I was going to ask you if the fact that Mr. Felton's book mentioning that the Jews in America are parasites.
That is not true, sir. No, you may not get away with a libel. I did not say Jews are parasites. I'm talking about the Israel lobby. That sort of defamation is standard procedure, and I will not stand for it.
In any event, when we speak about these issues, it is important, and I come back to making the statement again, that in presenting a program such as this, the library is not endorsing the views expressed by individual speakers when.
That's not the point.
Yeah.
It is the point.
Okay.
Well, the cost of this hall is an endorsement. The advertising it is an endorsement. Buying his books an endorsement.
90% of Canadians don't know that Canada has a free trade.
I think we're just going to have to call it in the evening.
Make one last comment.
Okay.
No books
Okay.
on sale, please.
Okay.